Hey, good morning or good afternoon on your side of the world, MJ. I appreciate the time here today and talking, and I think we should have a pretty cool conversation for some fans of both of our channels. A lot of my followers are CFA, CFP related, and with yourself, I see you have a lot of actuary content, but also some CFA content. Could have some overlap, but also some new faces, so I appreciate you getting on the call here.
No, it's a pleasure, and I'm glad that we finally found a time that we both are awake, seeing that we are on different sides of the world. I know it's a little bit early on your side, but yeah, it's mid-afternoon here. But absolute pleasure to be on the show.
Well, cool, cool. Hey, just to start off, because I mentioned that a lot of the subscribers to my channel probably are unfamiliar, and I know I wasn't familiar up until maybe my last year of university. What is it that an actuary does?
So it's a good question. I mean, and we always have a little joke in the industry. It's like, how many marks is this question for? Because I think actuaries are notorious for writing exams. We write lots and lots of exams, so we kind of are very good at answering exam questions. And I think the one mark answer is that actuaries confront risk. So normally in the financial domain, and we try and prepare for an uncertain future. What we found is that this tends to put us in the financial industries. That's kind of where we're traditionally placed. But there is a big movement in actuarial science to tap into what we call the wider fields. And this means going into all sorts of things, whether it's climate change, whether it's non-profit organizations, even sports, anything where there's uncertainty in the future. Actuaries love to go in and play. And essentially what we say is we have this belief that the past is an indicator of the future. So we use what happened in the past, the data and all of that, and we use that as the foundation for our models to forecast. And then we say, if this is what happened in the past, this is what might happen in the future, maybe we should do some things differently now so that we're not destroyed by the future. So some people like to refer to actuaries as risk managers, and I guess that is part of the job. We are identifying risks, we are measuring risks, we are managing them, we are monitoring them. But it's why I'm a little bit hesitant is because you don't want to because there's so many different types of actuaries, you don't want to put them in a box because another actuary might be listening and saying, hey, that's very different to what I do. For myself, or what tends to happen in actuarial science here in South Africa, and we follow very much what happens in England, the UK, because we were previously a colony of the UK. So we kind of have a very similar structure to them, where there's 8 technical exams. It's probably changed now because sometimes they combine the exams, but there's a lot of technical subjects, and this is like statistics, mathematics, financial engineering, all these kind of things, economics, accounting, all your technical subjects, which all your actuaries do. Then there's some application subjects such as communication, model documentation, and then one that puts fear in every single actuarial student's mind. It's called CA1, but they have renamed this exam to something else, but it's called Actuarial Risk Management. It's a monster exam because you have to learn about the pension industry, the life insurance industry, the general insurance industry, the health insurance industry, and the financial industry all in one exam. It's so big that it's written over 3 days. You write it on one day, have a day rest, and then you go in and you write some more. So it's a monster exam. But once you pass that, you become an associate actuary. And when you're an associate actuary, you get into the profession, you get all the perks and all that kind of stuff. You can then go and choose 2 subjects to specialize in. So I specialized in finance and risk management. And then depending on what you specialized in, depends on what you can write your fellowship in. So you could do your fellowship in life insurance, which is what traditional or the very first actuaries did. When do people die? How much money should they set aside for their widow? There's the general insurance actuary, which is your car accidents, your pension actuary. With my 2, it allowed me to either go into banking to become a banking actuary, which is very, very new. It's kind of within like the last 5 years that this fellow actuary has emerged. Essentially, just to help banks manage their credit risk and liquidity risk. So that's one that I could have taken, where instead I chose to do the financial actuary. So financial applications, investments, and all that type of stuff. And what was interesting about that fellowship is that if I was to show you the curriculum for that subject, being a CFA, you'd be like, hold on, this looks incredibly familiar, because it's almost like, I was actually comparing before this conversation, the CFA syllabus for level 3 and my financial fellowship. And it's very, very close. I mean, basically everything that you guys do for level 3, we're doing as well. And even when we were writing the exam, we would sometimes be put in a group with CFA level 3 guys. We would follow their blogs. I was reading a lot of CFA material for my exam. So the subject matter is very, very similar. Of course, the work-wise position is slightly different. So where a CFA is kind of, asset managers, and we manage people's money, generally, like whoever needs money to be managed, you go to your CFA and they can assist. The actuarial financial application is very much for your institutions. So your life insurers, your general insurers, your pension funds, all of these people have a lot of money that they need to invest. And as an actuary, one of the things that, because we've learned all about these institutions, we understand their liability profile very well. So we will normally assist these companies develop their investment strategy, kind of help them construct their portfolio, and we will give them advice on which CFA manager to go to. So we actually almost interview CFA managers, and we kind of say, okay, what is your philosophy to the market? What is your time frame? What market conditions does your thing work for? And if it aligns with our client's intentions, then we say, okay, this is a good match. And then the pension fund will say, okay, let's give 100 million to the CFA manager. And then the actuary's job's not done yet. We will then be part of that monitoring team. So we'll see, did you actually have any, style drift? Like you said, you're going to be passive, but you ended up selecting stocks, what's up with that? Or gosh, you thought you were going to have a very low tracking error, but it ended up being quite large. So we would investigate, monitor. So we could be your worst nightmare, or we could be your best friend. Best friend in the sense that we can send a lot of money your way. Worst nightmare in the sense that we kind of police what you guys are doing if you're investing money for these actuarial institutions. And Joe, I guess another big difference with CFA and actuary is CFA is global, which is great from a branding perspective. I mean, everyone kind of knows what a CFA is. You kind of see the logo when you're on Reddit and you see the ads pop. With actuaries, you kind of very much more local. So I guess the only difference with the syllabus would be, like, especially for my one, there was a big focus on South Africa's financial history, South Africa's tax law, South Africa's regulations, because you can imagine, like, if you're just learning finance, like just a very crude example, we kind of told you buy into an exchange traded fund if you want diversification. In South Africa, that wasn't always the case, because our stock market was kind of smaller. It was dominated by gold shares and mining shares, specifically in the late 90s, which means buying into an ETF did not really give you sector diversification. It wasn't worth, the management fees that go into an ETF, because, the stock market was so dominated by gold. So it's one of those things where South Africa, or what you do as an actuary, is you learn maybe a little bit more specific to your region. But I would say that's maybe the big differences, is actuaries may be specific to institutions, where CFA may be more general, and actuaries are more local focused, where CFA is more global. And in my opinion, there's a lot of benefits for being global. The fact that everyone knows what a CFA does. The Actuarial Society, especially here in South Africa, doesn't advertise enough. So people don't know what an actuary does. There really isn't that much of a presence, which is a good and a bad thing for me. A bad thing in that no one knows what it's doing, but a good thing in the sense that there's not many of us. So when we do have a job to do, we can get slightly higher rates because there's no one else that has studied to do this kind of stuff. And John, that's in a nutshell, I guess, actuary CFA.
Well, that was an extremely informational answer. I think I learned like 3 or 4 things that I hadn't heard of before, and you also knocked off a couple of the other questions that were on my list. So thank you for that background.
But in my day, there were 8 core technical exams, 3 core application exams, then 2 specialist technical exams, and then the fellowship, which was called a specialist application exam. And then there were a lot of these like little multiple choice questions like on law or on business awareness or professionalism. Like, so all in all, 15, maybe more, maybe less. It's a difficult, like I said, we write a lot of exams. So it's a lot.
An actuary, okay, so does every actuary have to become a fellow actuary? And once you decide to, are those specialist exams much more difficult? Is it kind of another level in the profession?
So most actuaries, or I shouldn't maybe say most, I'd say a lot of actuaries stop at the associate level, because once you're an associate level, you're considered to be a professional and you can do a lot of the actuarial things. The reason why you might want to do your fellowship in, let's say, life insurance is that is a requirement if you want to become something called a statutory actuary. And a statutory actuary is the person who gets to sign off on the life insurance reserve. So your life actuary is kind of saying how much money should we set aside to meet our future liabilities. They then come up with a figure. It's my job then to take and invest that money in such a way that doesn't ruin the company, but they're the ones who determine how much that money should be. Whereas that's your statutory role, where you'll maybe have more general actuaries or associate level who are doing more the pricing. You know, how much should we charge for taking on someone's mortality risk? So a company could have a range of different actuaries working in a bunch of different areas. If you're a very small company, you might have an actuary that does them all. But no, you kind of, the hardest exam, like I said, is that core application exam called Actuarial Risk Management, where you have to learn everything in a lot of detail, and it's insane. So much so that the specialist technical subjects were, let me give it this way. I wrote the financial one, it was a breeze. Finance comes very naturally to me. I wrote the general insurance one and it destroyed me. The maths was just, it was on another level. I just couldn't cope. So I then did the enterprise risk management one, which is very similar to FRM. So it's like I'm a bit of a blend of a CFA and an FRM. And this one was quite cool because you also got some more letters next to your name and this bit of like another profession. But I did that one, and that one was also came naturally to me, was a lot easier. The fellowship exam, I did fail it twice, and then I got it on the third attempt. And it's not that the questions are difficult. So I don't think I got anything wrong, but the questions would be like for instance, they had one question like, should they make an exchange traded fund of hedge funds? You know, so the answer is no. You know, it's like, that's a dumb idea, but it's for 20 marks. So if you just say no, it's stupid, they might give you half a mark. So you have to now generate 40 points on why, you know, and you have to talk about how different hedge funds take out different positions. So you're just diluting and the additional fees and this and, you know, so you have to go into a lot of detail on why the answer is what it is. So the answers are quite obvious. So sometimes people will look at the fellowship exams, like browse through it and be like, this is easy. This is easy. Go in, write the exam, and they'll fail. Not because they got anything wrong, but because they didn't write down enough. So the fellowships exams are notoriously difficult in the sense that they have a high failure rate. But the core application exam is a lot harder because sometimes you don't even know what the answer is for those questions unless you've studied. Yeah. And yes, the core technical, the early exams are very, very mathematical. So you have a lot of people passing them who are mathematically minded. You then get to this fellowship exam, and like I say, you know, should hedge funds be in an ETF? Where's the maths? You know, there's not a lot of mathematical calculations to kind of do that. You know, you need to have more industry knowledge. Like, hey, maybe there's not enough hedge funds to put into an exchange traded fund, or you know, hedge funds have got a lot of liquidity blocks where you can only invest at certain times and you can only withdraw at certain times. So how's an exchange traded fund going? Like, let's say you just suddenly get another 100 million. How are you going to put that money into the hedge funds if they're not going through a fundraising period, or, you know, if you're going to have to sell it? You know, so it's all more those practical issues. Why? So like I say, it's an easy question. The answer is no, it's bad. It's just explaining. And so you end up having to become incredibly cynical, incredibly skeptical, where, like I said, like for instance, I kind of look at this DeFi movement that's happening on the blockchain and all of that, and the actuarial mindset kicks in and it's just like, this is wrong, that's wrong. These are the risks they haven't taken into consideration. Gas prices are variable, it's going to crush anything of usability, you know, and And you actually don't become a fun person at parties because you kind of are tricked to see all the things that are wrong with it. And I think it's a good skill set to have when particularly the CFA guys come. They called it what? They called it the beauty parade, where you can imagine a pension fund sitting on like 100 billion or whatever. The CFA managers all come in, give the trustees their little notebook, the logo, look at our past performance, look how great our fund is doing. This is why you should invest with us. It's the actuary that has to sit down and say, hey, the past, even though actuarial science is built on the notion that the past is an indicator of the future, we know in finance that's not always the case, especially with funds. And we then have to interrogate the CFA managers to see if it is a good fit. So we can sometimes come across, specifically in the working environment, as the fun police, the guys that are trying to say no, 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 no. And that's why I think actuaries don't necessarily make good CEOs, because they kind of see all the things that could go wrong with the potential venture. But they make very good CROs, or chief risk officers, where they kind of say, they can kind of dilute the optimism of a CEO by saying, listen, it's a great idea, but just, bear in mind these certain things could happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've heard from a few different founders of businesses who are now either titled CEO or still just president that they wouldn't be as successful as they are now if they had known what they were getting themselves into. Could be put in other words, if they had known the risks of what they were getting into. So I could see how someone from that, working from that frame of mind might not end up as the CEO, because they could recognize 16 different risks that exist for a certain business decision that could end up profitably, but has 15 other solutions that wouldn't.
Well, it's almost this thing where you study actuarial science and you realize that failure is the most likely outcome, but it's almost something that we haven't, or the general public isn't aware of. So you have a lot of people, thousands of people becoming entrepreneurs, doing crazy things. Majority of them fail, okay? But a few of them, by pure chance or being at the right place at the right time, are successful. And those are the stories we celebrate. Those are the stories we share. Those are the stories that encourage the next generation of suckers to try and go through this thing. And that's why, yes, you do have CEOs who start crazy businesses that make an absolute fortune. But from an actuarial point of view, we're well aware of something called the survivalship bias. And we say, hey, for every successful one, there's a million that probably didn't get anywhere. And that's one thing where actuaries kind of come in, especially in the private equity space, because private equity managers love to come to trustees and be like, oh, we offer you diversification, we're getting 20% per annum, this is the asset class that you need to tap into. And an actuary has to come in and say, hold on, is this your first private equity fund? And then they're like, no, this is actually the third. And you're like, the third? Wow, what happened to the other two? Oh no, they failed because, and we're like, exactly, from a trustee point of view for a pension fund, you don't want to take on that amount of ruin risk. And actuaries come up with very much the market efficient view that everything is, all the price that we have is there for a reason. So if a private equity manager is saying, oh, I'm going to get you potentially 20% return, you must know that comes with a lot of risk compared to a more traditional fund. So actuaries, we're aware of failure. I mean, you can imagine in undergrad level, we're studying death. We're calculating, the mortality tables. We're learning that things die. So not only is it humans that die, we also know that businesses, ventures, and all these other things lie or this fiction. So a lot of people work hard, only a few really succeed. And of course, those people are celebrated and the rest are left feeling depressed. Whereas an actuary would be like, cool, let's not even enter this game to begin with. And I also, again, think maybe that's another reason why there's not many CEOs. There are some, and they've been, like even here in South Africa, one of our star companies at the moment is called Discovery. And they're in the health sector, health insurance. Started by an actuary, huge building in the center of Johannesburg. Like it's just beautiful. So there is an exception that, that they have made some good CEOs. But generally, your actuaries we're aware of the chaos that's out there, and we're like, this may be a little bit cautious before we just jump in with both feet.
MJ, have you seen the movie Just Go With It with Adam Sandler? I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. It was popular in the
Mm,
United States. He's an actuary.
mm. And this is the thing is I wouldn't. I don't like to classify him as an actuary just because. I so he's more of a risk analyst. Okay, so which is it is a part of actuarial science is analyzing risks. But I mean, that little computer thing that he has, and he types in the two girls' names is like, which one is less? So it's cringy for us to watch that.
That's what I was curious about, is what is the opinion of actuaries in watching that movie? I assume it's not favorable.
No, yeah, it's kind of, and I think this is the thing is actuaries do get that reputation that is kind of reinforced by the movies and Hollywood and that we're the boring number people. It's all just like numbers, numbers, numbers. I mean, let's take that movie for example. Those risks that he was typing in were qualitative risks. Okay, they weren't quantitative. There was the fact that the one girl was a dancer and the other girl did something else. How do you assign numbers to that? And you would need to do that if you were to quantify risk. And he was typing in qualitative factors, and somehow his magic computer spat out an answer with I think it was even like a number. So we would refer to it as superior accuracy, where you're trying to, like you can't necessarily say this is going to have a 5% chance of occurring. It's better to say that has a low chance of occurring. Very, very cringy for us to watch that movie. But this is also, I guess, the interesting thing about an actuary is that there's not necessarily something that we can do that no one else can. Risk analysis, there's the FRM people can do as well. Financial management, that's exactly what the CFA guys can do as well. A lot of, like, let's say, even mortality experience, there's a lot of what the statisticians can also do as well. So the way I try and explain actuarial science is that we're more of like an umbrella. It's an umbrella that has a whole collective of different things that comes together. And we almost have a holistic approach. By understanding each of them, we improve our understanding on all the other ones as well. So because we understand statistics really, really well, that should help us in understanding expected returns in the financial side. And that kind of thing. Or the fact that we learn about how financial returns aren't normally distributed, they're a little bit more wild, a little bit more crazy. We can then factor that into our statistics to say, hey, maybe the central limit theorem or just focusing everything on the normal curve isn't the best idea. We should maybe explore something else like extreme value theory and look at Pareto distributions and something more exotic like that. So the two can kind of help each other. And that's what really gets me excited with actuarial science is that, yes, there's a lot to learn, but everything that you learn helps the other things that you have learned. So it's not like, oh, I'm finished studying stats, now I'm finished studying finance. It's kind of you want to do the two simultaneously because they can help feed off on each other. And I think that's what gives, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I think that is what gives actuaries the edge in what they then decide to specialize in, is the fact that they have such a huge foundation of other things as well that they can sometimes bring to the front. So, like I say, but I'm very careful to say that because I know you've got the CFA channel and I want all the comments to be like, look at this arrogant actuary. Which is another thing. It is another thing that, I even remember the reason why I studied actuarial science was partially because of that. This whole idea that actuarial science was seen as the hardest degree. So I went in not really knowing what it was about, just that it was difficult, and that was kind of the attraction. And then, varsity was a struggle. So I went from being top class, top of my class, to being a mid-pack hack at university. And for someone, like you can imagine, for a young adult, someone who'd built their identity of being, you're smart, you're good at maths, and suddenly you're getting 50s and 60s for exams. Which was still pass. It was still considered, good enough. But it kind of, hurt my identity. It's like, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. So I think, some of the actuaries who do pass, they kind of then have this belief that they are better. And like I said, I sometimes refer to it as arrogant science because, we do lose a little bit of humility while going through this course.
Sure. Can we talk about EtherTree a little bit?
So, one of the things that I love to do is programming. And I think one of the things I tell all the actuaries on my channel is you got to study programming. Programming is the future. And even now with the update of the exams, there's now a lot of programming. There's 2 exams that have got programming components, and there's 2 other exams that are still using Excel and outdated technology. Right. But programming is essential, because in the future, a lot of the heavy computational stuff is going to be automated. So the actuarial reliance on mathematics is going to decrease, and it's going to be replaced with having to know programming. So I try to keep up to date with programming. And one of the ways I try to do that is with the blockchain. Bitcoin, yay, it's got a lot of hype around it. It's quite a fun community. People do crazy things. It makes every day interesting. So I joined a hackathon. This is actually the final week. Like after this call.
To interrupt you, I didn't understand the concept there. I mean, I looked through the project and I saw it was a submission for a hackathon. But what is a hackathon?
Oh, so a hackathon, it's very clever. It's these organizations come together and they have like a technology. And how do you get people to build on your technology? You offer like a $5,000 prize, and you make it anybody can enter and submit a project. $5,000 for them, it's like a drop in the ocean, and they're getting all of these people to basically do free development work for them. Yes, 90% of it's rubbish, but that small 10% is actually critical and builds your business. So these hackathons are big business. I mean, before COVID hit, I went to the Cape Town one, and it was a 3-day event, free food, free drinks, entertainment. We even had Vitalik, the guy who created Ethereum, come and give a talk. Like, it was a huge event. Now because of COVID, it's a global thing. So I don't actually know how many people have competed, but I joined a team, 3 American developers. So the guys are in the States, and I've got a friend who's helping me with project management. So she does the project management. She arranges meetings. She kind of talks. She actually built the team. I was like, this is the idea. Find me some programmers. And she did it. She's done an amazing job in that sense. And then, this hackathon the focus was called The Future of Finance. And I was like, well, if I studied finance, maybe I should have a go at this one. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's a little bit, it's a game. It's a little bit of a fun thing. But it's this idea of trying to address the diversification illusion. And that's this idea that, yes, traditional assets have got low correlations when the market's doing well. Like your bonds and equities move differently when things are going good. But what we've seen when the market crashes is that correlation increases and they all just go down. And one of the things that we study, and I guess this is where the statistics come in, is we play around with these things called copulas. And copulas think of them as like 3-dimensional statistical curves, and they're crazy things. From a mathematical point of view, you have to use programming to actually generate these things. They are insane. So and copulas kind of made their way into the financial industry. It was actually a little bit of maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but it's general knowledge now. But it was an actuary who introduced the idea of using a copula to measure the risk of mortgage-backed securities. Okay, and he used the wrong copula. He used a normal copula, and we all know that the normal doesn't have enough fat in the tails. But it was very, very easy to use. This was in the early 2000s. Computational power, it was there, but it wasn't as sophisticated as it is now. The bankers then saw this and were like, hey, the fact that this undervalues risk, that's fine because it means we can get a higher price for these things. So the regulators didn't know what the hell was going on because it was so complicated. So this is why the mortgage-backed securities were able to be given a AAA rating and, flooded the market. And we all know the crazy recession. And then that's where this SARA qualification, this Chartered Enterprise Risk Actuary, came from. It came in 2010 because it was like, hold on, we need professionals to learn about copulas so that this doesn't happen again. So that's why the copulas were now introduced to our syllabus because of the financial crisis. And what a copula does show is that the correlation between assets fluctuates, it changes. So when the market goes down, things become more correlated. And I think the best way to explain it is to think of diversification as a bodyguard who then runs away as soon as danger comes. So you're most vulnerable when you need the help. So what we wanted to do with EtherTree was, funnily enough, use securitization the very thing that had caused the financial crisis, and use it to securitize a risk that had a negative correlation to the rest of the market. And that's something that we refer to as lapse risk, which is something you come across in actuarial science. People buy insurance, or they buy a financial product, and then they give it up, they surrender it, they lapse. And this is a big risk for insurance companies because you have to claw back from the brokers, and it took a lot of financial advice to get that person in, and it really is an ugly thing to have to deal with. But what we wanted to do with EtherTree was to turn that risk into a reward situation, so that we could securitize it, turn it into an asset, so that if somebody lapses, you win. And that's what EtherTree is. You get a whole bunch of people, they contribute money for a given set of time, and if they lapse, they get kicked out, and the people who stay in it, basically like a survival fund, they then get to enjoy the total amount divided by the remainder. So if 100 people start and only 50 people are at the end, effectively you've doubled your money by just not lapsing, because you've made money on the people who have lapsed. And they might even put in a bounty that if certain conditions are met, the people who put their money in get that bounty. So it's kind of, we complicated it very quickly, but the essential idea is that if you don't lapse, you win. If you do lapse, you lose. And the nice thing is, why you want to add it to your portfolio is because you now have exposure to other people lapsing. So if the market goes down, more people are expected to lapse, which means your investment is expected to get a higher return. So if you put it into your portfolio, you're now actually getting a real diversification benefit during market downturn. And that's kind of the idea that we want to communicate to the judges, is that we're using the blockchain to securitize negatively correlated risks. Yes, our game is very tongue-in-cheek, it's very small, but we're hoping that the judges will see the philosophy behind it and be like, hey, this is quite innovative. What other risks could be securitized on the blockchain? And hey, this might be something that is incorporated in the future of finance. But like I said, the actual game as it is more of a fun wealth redistribution system at its moment.
For anyone who wants to see how the game works and how the rules work, just check out the project on MJ's channel. And one of the questions I had to the game then was that it looked like the planters were better for diversify. If you choose to be a planter, or if you end up being a planter, you're in a better situation to diversify away risks because it has the payout when lapses come. But in the game, how do you get to choose to be a planter or waterer? And is there a difference in the expected return for planters and waterers?
So the way we see it is that your planters, they're taking high risk, high return, and your waterers are low risk, low return. So as a waterer, as long as you don't lapse, you're going to win. Okay, you're not going to win that much. I mean, maybe a few percentage depending on what the duration is and the parameters, but low risk, low return. Your planter, it's high risk, high return. And the reason why it's high risk is because in order to get people to come to your tree instead of everybody else's tree, you want to put up a bounty. You want to put up a generous sum of money that can potentially be won. So you might want to put up, say, 100 ether. Now, not everybody has 100 ether just lying around, especially when the current Ethereum price is over $1,000 for one of these coins. So it's more for a big player. But you would want to put this really big bounty out there to attract the waterers. Of course, if conditions aren't met, you could lose that thing. So that's why there's the high risk. But if it goes in your favor and other people lapse and all that kind of stuff, you get your planter's fee, which you also get to determine. So if you're too greedy, you're going to scare people away. If you're too generous, you're going to lose. So that's where the game theory comes in. You need to try to find that sweet spot. But if you do, yes, from a planter point of view, you could see yourself making quite a generous return by playing this game. However, like I say, you only really want to compete as a planter if you have significant funds. So think of your planter as being almost like an institution. Would we envision that them being the ones that are planting the trees, like companies, and your waterers are your retail investors, everyday people like yourself and me. So those are the kind of two differences. But the reason why we wanted the planter is because we didn't know what the perfect parameters should be. So when you don't know what the perfect parameters should be, you let the market decide, Or if you're building an AI, you let the machine learning determine what it is. You want to try and hard code as few things as possible. So it is a bit of an experiment, I think in the beginning there's going to be crazy fluctuations. Maybe if this thing does work, we might find, okay, these are the set of parameters that are optimized. But what those actually are, only time's going to tell.
Well, best of luck. I think it's a cool project. When is the hackathon event?
So it ends tomorrow. So after this, I've got a call with the team just to kind of. So I've made that demo video, but I'm going to be chatting with them, and we're going to make an actual walkthrough video of the website and the actual code. And then I think we've got a judging slot on Tuesday next week. So we have to submit by tomorrow, and then the judging slot is on Tuesday, and hopefully we win. I've got a. It's weird. Like I said, you don't know how many other projects have been submitted, and it is a global thing. So again, it's probably the arrogant science coming and thinking we have a chance of winning. But yeah, I'm quite confident with the idea behind it. Of course, I've been a little bit distant from the programming, but that was one of the things I wanted to do. I wanted to focus more on the idea and the concept and let more professional programmers do what they had to do. So yeah, it's been fun in the sense that because I normally work as an independent, like I normally work on my own. So it's been quite a fun thing working as a team and, letting other people do things, which even at school I was very uncomfortable with. I was, was a little bit of a control freak. So it's been good for me. It's been good as a growth, personal development and all those kind of things as well.
Well, good. Then it sounds like a good exercise to do. And you said $5,000 if you win the thing. So
look, it does have to be split between the five of us. So look, $1,000 is still good. It's still good. You can have a good night out with that. Yeah, if there are comments and people have got a lot of questions, I'm more than happy to do another one of these with you and address whatever questions that your subscribers have. So we could, cool. Yeah. If it does get, if it gets like 100 dislikes, then of course you'll probably be like, delete this video. I never want to see this guy again. But if we do get some good positive engagement, I am available to do this again, and we can answer any questions that your subscribers might have.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. So thanks for the offer, and thank you for grabbing the second time here with me this morning, and getting these questions answered. Because I know I've learned a handful of things, and a lot of other people will too.
No, it's been a pleasure. No, thank you so much, and have a great day.